From driving drunk at 122 kilometers per hour to hotel room orgies and tax evasion, these are the most fatal mistakes that cost football players millions. Most footballers have a thing for fast cars, including Marcos Alonso, but when you decide to take a spin after a whole night out drinking, it almost never ends well. Chelsea fullback Marcos Alonso must not have known this when he climbed into his BMW on May 3, 2011. Marcos was living the dream, enjoying an excellent career with the Bolton Wanderers, and what better way to celebrate his success than with booze and a late-night party in Madrid. Boy, did he know he was in for a shock of his life. The morning after the party, Alonso got into his BMW with his older brother Miguel, his former Real Madrid teammate Jamie Navarro, and a 22-year-old lady. Driving at 122.8 kilometers per hour in wet conditions in a 50 kilometer per hour zone and a blood alcohol level of 0.93 milligrams per liter, which is about 3 times the permissible alcohol level in Spain, by the way, Alonso crashed into a stone wall. Alonso and all 3 passengers in his BMW were terribly injured, and the 22-year-old lady in the car was rushed to the hospital with trauma. About 30 minutes later, the girl lost her life. A night out that was supposed to be fun turned into a nightmare. One horrible decision in one of Spain's top footballers was looking at the possibility of serving a sentence. Alonso faced trial, this time sober, and while he could have seen his sentence keep him in prison for 4 years, he got away with 21 months. Fortunately for him, Alonso had the full sentence drop, but only after paying 500,000 euros in an out-of-court settlement to the victim's family. Not to mention about his 61,000 euro fine, the wreck to his beautiful BMW, and his temporary ban from driving, it was sure that his bank account suffered a massive blow. With more than $1 million drained, but that's not really a huge price to pay when you get away with something like that. On the other hand, some players really don't have that much luck like our boy here, even for things which you might consider a very minor offense. On September 27, 2012, former Manchester City star Carlos Tevez was hit with a €1 million fine for losing his temper and staging a protest during the Champions League clash with Bayern Munich by refusing to play for the club. Unfortunately for him, City had a zero misconduct policy and a regulation that states that every player has an obligation to participate in any matches in which the player is selected to play for the club when directed by a club official. Really bad move, Tevez. You can't be bigger than your club. This Manchester City striker realized that a little too late. City manager Roberto Mancini was furious. He accused Tevez of refusing to appear as a substitute when called upon during the Bayern game. The Italian manager went even as far as stating that the striker was finished at the club. But, well, it was just a misunderstanding. Tevez apologized, but not before being hit with a 2-week suspension. Tevez, reportedly earning 250,000 euros per week, was also hit with a fine of 4 weeks' wages following his refusal to play during the club's 2-0 defeat at the Allianz Arena. Over $1 million, but if you thought that was unfair, wait until you hear how it went down with Lionel Messi. While other players are busy crashing Ferraris and losing their money in Las Vegas casinos, this man is often training alone like a Spartan in sub-zero weather conditions. But does that exempt him from the $1 million mistakes? Not really. While his mistake is rather ridiculous, it did cost him over $1 million, and we're talking about none other than the little man himself, Lionel Messi. His mistake? Well, one can most accurately describe it as being too good for the club. We all know the story. He is an exceptionally talented player that made his Barcelona debut at 17 and rose to become the club's highest goal scorer. It is shocking that the club had no place for him even after Lionel Messi had agreed to a new 5-year contract with Barcelona in 2021 after his previous deal expired on June 30th. Well, not because they didn't want him, but because keeping Lionel Messi would mean that Barcelona's wage bill would stand at 110% of their revenue. Definitely a tough decision for any board. And Barcelona responded by cutting the 34-year-old playmaker and 6-time Ballon d'Or winner out of their long-term plan to stay within La Liga's salary budget. This meant that from June 30th, 2021, Lionel Messi became a free agent. In that time, he was out of a contract. Lionel Messi missed out on a potential wage of over $1 million. The striker was eventually picked up by French side Paris Saint-Germain and has enjoyed a fine spell since then. Guess losing out on €1 million doesn't really affect you when you're that good. Could Cristiano Ronaldo say the same when his $2 million Bugatti Veyron was crashed by his bodyguard? Let's find out. Unlike Ronaldo's 2009 experience when he crashed his Ferrari on his way to training, this was a less scary experience as the Portuguese superstar was not even in the car, but it still cost him a lot. No one wants their $2 million car crashing, especially not a 1,200 horsepower hypercar. Even Ronaldo referred to the car as an animal. Perhaps beast would have been more appropriate, but you get the idea. Ronaldo had copped the roadster version of the Ultimate Production Veyron in 2016 after the Portuguese national soccer team won the UEFA European Football Championship. On June 21, 2021, Ronaldo's $2 million Bugatti Veyron was towed from the crash site near a major Cannes resort. Apparently, it had been crashed by one of the men Ronaldo had hired to protect him. How ironic. The bodyguard reportedly lost control and skidded into a wall in the residential Major Cannes estate, and the supercar was taken away in a blue tarpaulin as the police launched an investigation. But even after the huge damage to his car, Ronaldo promised to compensate the house owner whose mansion got damaged in the crash. As for his 1,200 horsepower hypercar, it would need a lot more than a face beat after the substantial damage to the front end. Thankfully, there was only material damage and no one was injured during the crash. The driver also accepted full responsibility for the event. Fortunately for Ronaldo, he also had his Mercedes-AMG G63 shipped to Majorca for the vacation. And while his Veyron is out of commission, he still has a $3.1 million Chiron and a $12 million Centodici at home waiting to satiate his Bugatti fix. Hopefully, no one crashes that one. Perhaps it's safe to say that Cristiano Ronaldo was noble in his case because of some rather ghastlier mistakes in the past, and this time we aren't talking about accidents. Nah, it's the big financial mistake that just about the most renowned players, even Lionel Messi and Diego Maradona, have dealt with: tax evasion. In January 2019, Cristiano Ronaldo was fined $21.6 million for tax fraud according to prosecutors. Ronaldo had dodged taxes in Spain between 2010 and 2014 while playing for Real Madrid. The settlement would see the Portuguese star avoid a potential 23-month prison sentence. Quote, under Spanish law, a first-year offender can serve anything less than a 2-year sentence under probation, and Ronaldo will not have to go to prison, Reuters reported, adding, his court appearance lasted about 15 minutes as he only needed to sign off on the previously settled agreement. That sounds like a lot, but it's not really a big deal for a man like Ronaldo. According to Forbes, Ronaldo was the third highest paid athlete of 2018 and the second highest paid soccer player, earning $108 million for the year. He made over $60 million of this total from his salary and winnings, and about $47 million from endorsements and partnerships. Which really begs the question, why should he evade taxes in the first place? Perhaps it's because he just wanted to take everything home. And now we're passing the ball to a player that made so much but had just about nothing to take home. George Best was a legend by all standards, having played for Manchester United from 1963 to 1974. George Best had amassed a ridiculous amount of money. George Best was the first big earner to have earned €1,000 a week. Doesn't sound like a lot now, but in 1968, €1,000 a week was just about as good as it gets. Unfortunately, George Best spent 90% of his earnings on women, drinking, and fast cars. The remaining 10% were recorded that he squandered. After a spell at 2 nightclubs in Manchester in the late 1960s, George Best quickly developed problems with gambling, womanizing, and alcoholism. An anonymous waiter, in fact, opened up about his experience delivering champagne to Best's hotel room. When he got in, he saw thousands of pounds of casino winnings lying gingerly on the bed with the current Miss World in the room with George. That's one way to spend your fortune, but George seemed to think otherwise after a long life of addiction. His final message to the world: don't die like me. He urged all footballers and non-footballers alike to avoid mistakes that could prematurely end their careers. But will footballers really stop making reckless decisions? To find out more about that, check out the other videos. Trust me, man, you don't want to miss these ones. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.